The first instance that I can think of was in 200% and Bloody Thirsty, which was in 1987, I think. This beautiful set with a painted sky as a backdrop and a neon sign saying the title of the show. And it's framed by branches of real trees. And then the trees became very crude and infantile costume in showtime. Brown, painted, cardboard box. Two costumes, tree costumes that Claire and I inhabited. We called them the naughty trees. And the reference point was obviously some kind of kids' performance where two performers, lacking very much self-discipline, had been put inside of these very constricting and uncomfortable tree costumes. Those trees were very bad-tempered and they were always fighting. The real trees came back in the coming storm. But the branches, 6 or 7 little branches that were used in the coming storm, they were much more stripped down compared to the trees in 200%. Much less beautiful objects, and more like a kind of hopeless attempt at representing the outside world. But the trees themselves they're just pathetic. So maybe the whole thing about the trees on stage is about the impossibility of representation. Again, how having the natural world on stage is impossible in the way that putting dying on stage is impossible. And therefore it's the thing that you want to do. Oh, I forgot the other trees. Of course, we've got really beautiful trees in The Last Adventures. But they're quite stylized, and they're cut out of hardboard and they're carried around the space, which is, for that show, it's quite a large empty space. And for certain sections we all carry these trees. The game of the trees seemed to be about being part of a group. Individual trees being maverick and setting out on these kind of wild, darting dashes. Because they move around, these trees, in The Last Adventures. They're like the magical forest that moves. I don't know if you think of all the trees that we've put on stage, or the number of times that we've tried to work with them. It's possible to see a whole series of characteristics that we've found for them. Sometimes it's about a familiar fairy tale notion of the woods or the enchanted forest, and sometimes it's a much cruder storybook, two-dimensional thing about the tree. Oh yeah, Club of No Regrets, that had trees in as well. Branches that were tied to the set. Again, kind of framing, I think. But they got to be very beautifully lit and covered with flower, and an element of the text that ran through the show was that Helen X, who seemed to be running the order of the scenes as they were called for again and again, was describing herself all the way through the show as being lost in a terrible woods. There was a line about a leaf falling that got repeated over and again. It was a text that Tim had written, and after a really noisy bit of the show it all got very quiet. And there was a line, I think it just went, "Look, did you see that leaf falling?" Maybe the sense that in the chaos and the mayhem of the terrible woods, which was the place she found herself in, there was this little moment of stillness, this tiny thing of the leaf, a single leaf falling to the ground.